Welcome back, folks, to the Black Girl Flow podcast. We are so excited to be closing out a really great month of so much conversation about love and relationships with a really, really awesome special guest. G has joined the Black Girl Flow podcast today as our special guest, and we are thrilled to get the conversation started. But we always start our podcast, y'all know how it is, with a nice little pulse check, get a sense of how we're feeling, how we're entering the week. This is just an opportunity for folks to check in with themselves. So I know for me, it has been just a whirlwind. I genuinely think that my body is having almost like a relived experience of the doomsday that March is. You know, like it's almost like, oh, we're doing this again.
Right.
And it's kind of those like moments of just reflection of like, where was I last year? What was I the year before this? And I'm just kind of like feeling that pause and being like, ooh, and it's so wild to think this might be prompted from my iPhone memories photos that just like pop up saying like, you were in the house 2 years ago, you still in the house a year ago, you know, you're still doing that. So I'm definitely just like processing the like, what is all of this and what is life? But really excited and looking forward to the springtime. So that's how I'm entering this space, this episode. And G, I'll pass it to you to check in with everybody.
Wow. I feel like the past couple of weeks have just been crazy. There's been so much to digest and so much to learn and so much to navigate. I feel like I was talking to one of my friends this morning about like how are you feeling, right? Because that's such a big kind of question. And my response was, I'm really leaning into authenticity. Like, and I know that, that's kind of like deeper than the how are you feeling, but that was like really what was going on for me. And I was like, I'm having lots of moments where I'm getting some stuff off my chest, like I'm really having those keep it real with you moments. I'm kind of coming to people and saying, you got me effed up, you got me all the way messed up. And I think what needs to happen is we need to check in. And I need to let you know how I really feel, as opposed to just eating it, and as opposed to just kind of laying back and letting things kind of fester. I feel like I'm really in a space of I'm not sitting with this if I don't have to. I'm saying it. I'm gonna let you chew on it and process it. But while you do that, I'm gonna keep it pushing. So I feel like that's kind of how I've been feeling, and I like it. I like this new space, and I'm excited to see like what this evolves and what this turns into, because it's not rude or disruptive. It's really just honest.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we love a good, like, I don't know, reflective moment where we realize like, hey, I'm going to have to like stand up for myself more, or I don't appreciate the way that you're talking to me, because I feel like those moments help us create better boundaries with people. And then also like allow us to know how to show up for others as well. So we love that. That's super dope, G. Thanks so much for sharing. I
No
feel like
problem.
for my pulse check, we're closing out February. I'm so happy that I survived all of the couple propaganda, because it was coming at me left and right on everyone's Instagram pages, Facebook feeds, Pinterest notifications. Like y'all couldn't shove it enough in my face. But I feel like very calmed and like restored going into March. One thing that I've been really trying to do is take control over my finances. So I feel like February was the month of like me actually like budgeting. And if you know me, you kind of know that like I'm like, budget who, budget where? Like I don't know her, never have spoken to her. But I'm starting to feel more in control, and I feel like just the process of learning a lot about like how to like boost your credit and just like normal things like how to do your taxes by yourself, like has been making me feel a lot more in control of my life. So I'm happy to have escaped the couple propaganda and actually gotten into my bag, literally, physically, all of the things.
Well, I love this. I feel like we're all really kind of entering this like pensive and just like, we're going to see what this is all going to do for us. Like, this is, and I feel like that's a really great energy to go into the springtime with, to be like, let's see what comes from all of these insights and learnings and groundings and Liv's bank account. So we're going to check back up with that one. Okay. At the end of the year, I'm going to remind you.
Keep me accountable. I would love for y'all to keep me accountable. But, you know, even though the couple propaganda and the season of love is coming to an end, I'm super excited for today's episode because, gee, like, I think you're the first Black woman sexologist that I've ever met in my entire life. And I just know that you're about to like teach us so much about love, intimacy, like how we can just dig deeper and learn more about our own intimacy levels within our life. So I'm super excited to have you here. We both are. And I just feel like we should just jump into the conversation because I just know that like you're gonna drop some gems. So for
The
those that don't know,
pressure. Oh my the pressure. I'm here for it, but
no,
the pressure.
After
no
she ravaged
pressure.
all the couple content too, she set the stage, G. She set the stage. She's like,
The bar is so high here.
we need the
Black
facts.
sexologist. Like,
I know, and
sure.
it's crazy because I feel like we just need to have more of these conversations because for a lot of Black women growing up, you can't really go to your parents and talk to them about like relationships and like, you know, your first sexual experiences. And even within like some friend groups, like we're all just trying to figure it out. And you know, it takes a minute. So it's like I'm trying to ask all of the questions.
Liv brings out
Absolutely.
her own personal. She's like, I've actually been wondering
I
because
know.
what do we do when we have questions that we can't go? We go to our friends, we go to our girlfriends, we go, and that's where we have the conversation. And that's so much of what the Black Girl Flow community is. And that's why we're so excited to bring you into the conversation, G, because sometimes we be coming up with a lot of things in our head and we got a lot of societal narratives telling us something. So I think not only your experience, but your expertise is really going to bring life to the conversation. But let's just get a baseline, right? Like for those who do not know what a sexologist and a master sexpert entails, can we break that down? Because I think people might be sitting there being like, oh, so she's the knowers of all the things,
Right,
so
right.
so help us out. Give a little bit of context to our listeners about what that entails and really how you came to this profession.
Okay, so first let me say I kind of love like how this is kind of playing out. Why I kind of got into what I do is definitely rooted in the generational curses of what I call them, right?
Mhm.
Having sex being so stigmatized and so taboo and such a topic that it felt so dirty, right? But it was one of the ones that everyone was doing what no one was talking about.
Exactly.
So from that lens, it was really coming from a place of trying to build community and to have these conversations so that we're more informed. And when we're more informed, we're making better decisions. And when we're making better decisions, we should hopefully be influencing others to do the same. But to answer your question in terms of what a sexologist is, sexology is more of a science, right? So it's a science that really studies human behavior, human interests, human desires, and human preferences. And what it does, it looks at sex and sexuality, but from a different lens and a different perspective. So it's not just the act of sex, and it's not just the toys or the tools or the things that kind of go into having sex as an action or a physical connection. It's more so of looking at it from a holistic perspective and how it shows up in our lives and how it kind of impacts and influences our way of thinking or our way of interacting in our relationships and things of that nature. Um, A master sexpert is the other side of the coin, in a sense where that it speaks to more of relationship coaching and more of
Mm.
sex ed coaching. So when you put the two together, it kind of gives you a more well-rounded perspective and lens of where you can kind of think about the nuances and the intricacies of a relationship. And then you can kind of take that and you can go from there to think about how that influences or what type of our perspective of sex, or our perspective, our behaviors, our patterns, our traits, what kind of appeals to us and what speaks and resonates to us. And then from there, you can take that a step further and you can say, okay, well, I know how I am in a relationship and I know what I like and I know what I'm into. What are some tools or what are some strategies or what are some devices that I can use to kind of maximize these things for me? And that's a little bit more of the sex ed and the pleasure part of it.
Wow, that psychological background, because I feel like that context is also super helpful because I mean, it is a study of like, how we connect with other people and like our own our own processes. It's like kind of blowing my mind honestly right now.
You're welcome.
I'm like, she just said what it was. Like, you didn't even get into it too deep, too deep.
You're welcome.
Exactly. There's this. Wait, so then what do you feel like your clientele primarily looks like? Like when would you recommend that someone like goes to a sexologist?
Well, personally, I think that everyone at some point should have some type of interaction or connection with the sexologist, right?
Mm,
So, and I understand that, coaching and counseling and things like that might not actually be appealing to everyone, but I think just from a perspective of an education lens, right? So a workshop, a conversation, something like this, where I feel like, as you said, there's lots of questions that we have. And sometimes we're asking them to individuals that might be too specific and too focused on just a piece of the question, right? So I like to think of myself as someone that kind of digs a little bit deeper and looks at things from more than one perspective, right? So if you say something like, and I feel like a lot of times when we hear sexologist, because the word sex is in it, it's always a
mm,
sex question, right? So it's
mm,
like, how do I last longer? Or how do I do this? Or how do I do that? And it really doesn't get to the heart of the question, why do you want these things? Or who do you want to have these experiences with? Or how often, like these types of deeper questions. So I would think that obviously we can do lots of things and feel like we don't need help with anything. And I totally understand that. But I would say that anyone that feels like they're not getting what they want, right? Because
mm,
that's subjective. So when you feel like you're not connecting with the people that you want to connect with, when there's like a misalignment, when you feel like you're looking or you're trying to date and you're not necessarily getting that type of connection, I would say to find a sexologist. And the reason why is because when you think about, and nothing wrong with dating coaches or relationship coaches or intimacy coaches, but I feel like sometimes they're a little bit too nuanced. And it depends on the person, right? So if you say, I really want to find better connections, but I also want to just meet people that I can kind of have lasting relationships with, that I can have amazing sex, that I can have a love that kind of looks and feels like this, that I can have a connection that means these things. Like if you can kind of go to that extent, then I feel like you need a little bit more than a nuanced coach. I feel like you need someone that's going to be a little bit more integrative and a little bit more dynamic in a sense of really wanting to unpack. You know what I mean? Like take it apart and really understand what do you really want? Like where are you going? Where are you going with all this? Because you're telling me I want love, I want a boyfriend, I want a man, I want a girlfriend. Like you're telling me all these things, but like let's just go a little bit deeper and make sure that when we start addressing things, we can kind of get to the root of it, but then
mm.
also come up with strategies and steps to make sure that you're staying on track to get to where you need to be, as opposed to just saying, okay, go to this app, or okay, say this and say that. Like it's more of a it's more of an intense program with someone. I can't speak for everyone, but with me, it's more of an intense program where we're coming up with plans together. And we're trying to figure out how to get you to your goal. So we're coming up with smart goals here, and we're doing, I'm your accountability partner. You know, I'm checking in with you, and I want to make sure, you know, I want to see you win. But because I want to see you win, I want to know that I'm giving you the right information and that I'm putting you on the right path, which means that we really got to get to the heart of what's going on. And I think that's when I would try to recommend someone like myself or my services to someone, because if you just want to go on a date, then you might not need me. You might not. If you just want to have good sex, you might not need me. If you just want to, you know, perfect your skills in a particular bedroom activity, or if you want a tour, you might not need me, right? But if you want to, you know, really take it there, then you need somebody like me.
And I think everybody after this, you're gonna get bombarded with email coaching requests, because what I love the way that you frame that is it's so open and it's inviting, and it's not, and I think sometimes when we have this conversation around sex, we have been so conditioned and socialized to think that it looks a certain way, it smells a certain way, you know, it is a certain way. The way that you frame this is like, no, 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 no. It's about seeing your whole self in this, about interrogating how you've even, what those messages we've internalized shapes how you're showing up in relationships and moments of intimacy. And I think oftentimes too, when we even think of sex, you know, that's also so many norms of how we see that as just cisgendered, and just we think that it's oftentimes just like any type of penetration, and it's so much more than that. And I think Liv and I both identify as cisgender, and we've talked a lot about trying to kind of acknowledge the societal, you know, taboos and narratives about women embodying their sexuality. And even in a non-sexual way, we have these Jezebel narratives, we have these, you know, purity culture that show up and project on us differently. So the way that you're talking about it just being so open to building that plan, being that accountability, but I'm like, come on, who is this signing up for that? This is what you need. Like, this is what you need. And,
Right.
and to
This is
your
what you
point,
need.
yeah, to your point, it can be one conversation to ask your girlfriends what sex toy that they're using. It's a different conversation when you're trying to get to the root of your intimacy problems. Okay. And with that, you need some help with that one.
No, for sure. I'm like out here listening to you, and I'm like, just wait till I get a man. Me and him are both going to G. But then I was like, you know what? I also feel like there are some things that I could still talk to you about, like as a single person, like regarding my own intimacy issues and like how I'm grappling with that. So I just want to make it clear, like you work with both single and coupled people.
Absolutely. And to be honest with you, when I started this, I said that I would work with women and
Mhm,
couples.
mhm,
And literally, like 10 minutes before I hopped on this, I just updated my website to say that I work with individuals and couples,
mhm,
because what I noticed was that I was having conversations with men, and they need it too, you know? And I think that what happens is that as a woman, especially as a Black woman, I recognize the burden that we kind of go through, and and how we indirectly get taught that our pleasure is supposed to be for someone else, or that these
Mm.
relationships need to be centered for us, but it's more about trying to keep him, or try to do things to make sure that, you know, you're kind of connected to someone in that way, because you don't want to be single, you don't want to be lonely, you know, like we kind of have to deal with all the messaging that we're getting. But I think what it gets overshadowed is that men are receiving messaging as well.
mhm.
And you kind of want them to have that connection to another man that can kind of help put them on that path. But there's nothing like a woman that can understand both sides of the coin and can really be non-judgmental and not biased, and really see how the connection between the man and the woman really kind of walk that fine line, and be able to say, you know, well, sir, you need to be accountable for this as well. And sir, I know that you were taught that your role in a relationship was this, but maybe it isn't, you know, like I feel like it needs to happen on both sides. So to definitely answer that, like I do work with couples and I do work with women, and I'm going to start working with men as well. But what I think is important to touch on what you said is that I think that sometimes we wait too late, right? So we wait to be in a relationship, or we wait to be partnered to start to ask these questions, or we wait until we have this type of connection and that we want to make it deeper. But if we started off in a place where we were coming into these things full and our cup was at the brim, these relationships will be allowing us to overflow. And because they're overflowing, the issues that we're coming across and the situations that we're trying to navigate, it wouldn't feel so intense and so depleting. It would be more so, I need to figure out how to get through this challenge, as opposed to, let me figure out how to unpack my own shit and then meet you over here to help you figure out yours, and then we need to figure out how to do this together. Like, it's too much. It's too much. Now, does that happen? Can we figure it out? Absolutely. But I think a lot of times that we think about it like steps. When I get to do this, then I can do that. And to your point, is the same thing with finances. Once I get this much money, then I can do that. Sometimes if we take all the layers back, and if we kind of start from the beginning and think about, well, what do I need to have the things that I want? Or what do I need to achieve the goals that I want, right? And a lot of that is going to start with us fixing us and unpacking us and letting our stuff go and releasing it and allowing it to manifest into what it's supposed to be, to then say, guess what? Now we can be together. Because now I see you when you see me.
Amen. Preach. preach.
Out here,
right? Because at the end of the day, we want somebody to see us for who we are. But how am I supposed to see you and you supposed to see me when I can't even figure out what's going on in here? Like, I got to figure this out first, so that you can see what you're supposed to see, and not all the fog and the glass. Like we need to get it together. So I don't think that you should not, and again, right, I'm not pushing my services on anyone, but I wouldn't wait. I would think that if you can acknowledge that there's room for growth and improvement, that would be your time to start, going below the surface, so that you're preparing yourself and you're aligning yourself, and you're also opening yourself up to get the person that you are supposed to have, and not what you think you're supposed to get.
Oof. Oof.
I know that last one. That
one hit.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
You can see Liv and I's face where we got our questions we were asking, but we're so enthralled in the conversation.
You're welcome.
Because it's so real. And I think what you touched on is what we usually get wrong about this conversation. We get wrong where to start. And we get wrong what the outcome and the focus should be, and when we start to not even let go of that, but reframe that, zoom out a little bit, ground ourselves, give a couple woosahs, because what you're so right, and I think a lot of us can pull from and often have traumatic experiences, is when you're in the thick of it, trying to figure it out. The intensity of all you can see is just what's going right and what's going wrong, and you're muddled in between it. That's typically what we think about, is when to have that conversation. But I love your invitation. Like you said, it's not a pushing on, but just an invitation to be like, yo, it doesn't have to be like that. It does not have to look like that. You don't have to look chaotic. Like, chill, girl, chill. So I love that. And I think a lot of people will resonate with that.
No,
and I think what's important to kind of remember too is that there's nothing wrong with being alone. And I think that when you start to reframe that, is that you're never really alone. Like, there's so many different parts of yourself as an individual, right? So when you think about when you go to work, or when you think about when you're with your friends and your family, you're not always 100% of yourself. So if you really think about all the different things that you like to do and the places you like to go and the things that you like to kind of enjoy, you don't really allow yourself to show up all the time. So you're never really alone if you decided to take some time to yourself and really pay attention to the things that don't get attention. Go to the
Yeah.
places that you don't actually get a chance to go to. Do some of the skills and the hobbies and the crafts that you don't get a chance to kind of let that manifest for you. So um, I think that we kind of focus on relationships a lot, and I think it's hard for Black women because you're struggling trying to find someone, and there's not enough. Like there's not enough people out here, and it's messy. It's messy in these streets.
So it's, girl, I'm in Atlanta, so I know you already know I know it's
Ooh.
Yeah,
It's hard out here.
It so is. And I think what you're talking about too, in this kind of reframing and moving beyond just the very binary ways that we think about relationships and sex and all that, is really inviting us to expand the conversation to intimacy and to love. And so I'd love to hear you kind of expand on how you see all of those connected to kind of showing up for yourself and hopefully for a partner, or in some way, and the emphasis of looking at intimacy and love as you want to think about your sexual being and showing up. So I'd love for people who'd be like, why does intimacy matter in sex, or why would we want to focus on that in love? I'd love for you to kind of go into that a little
Okay, so that's a lot.
bit.
Just be honest with you, that's
Yeah.
a lot. I was actually like kind of tagged to write a definition of what like love is that I do have. And I feel, you know what? We're gonna read it. It might be fitting, right? So love is beautifully complicated. It may be the most important and complex human emotion we experience. Love is both a verb and an abstract noun. It can occur in stages and vary in type. It can be defined as a set of emotions, beliefs, and behaviors often associated with strong and intense feelings. Love can be unpredictable. Its its characteristics may be expressed, experienced, and show up differently in each person and each relationship. Love may vary in intensity, elicit both positive and negative feelings, and change over time. But ultimately, love in its purest form is unconditional. It does not have stipulations or hidden agendas. It is free flowing, life changing, ever evolving, and a major part of our human experience. Now, I read that because if you ask me what is love, like it took me time to really articulate, right? And to write down and to find the words to describe what is love, as opposed to just saying, oh, it feels good, it makes me happy, like to really dig deeper into that. And I think that if you kind of follow what I'm saying, it does not say intimacy, it does not say sex. And the reason why is because you can have love without intimacy and without sex. Just like you can have intimacy without love and sex, and you can have sex without intimacy and love. So when you think about what you want from these longer lasting and these deeper relationships, you want all three, right? But you may not get all three in every relationship, and that's okay, right? So intimacy is more of the connection. It's more of the emotional support, the synergies, the feeling behind being close to someone and having a connection. You can be intimate with a non-sexual partner. And the reason behind that is because sex is a physical act that is more pleasure driven. And there should be pleasure that happens in love and in intimacy, but it may not look and feel or be the same as the pleasure that you get from sex. And I think in a lot of instances, sex is more of a goal oriented type of situation. Intimacy typically would not be the same goal as sex. And love should never be the same goal as sex. So they're all three very different things. They do have some overlap, but the connection between them should be somewhat distinct, and it should be understood before going into a relationship with anyone. And it shouldn't be something that's like forced or pushed. In terms of intimacy, because intimacy is different, you can kind of experience it different. And you could experience it in situations like, obviously, we'll talk about physical intimacy that kind of aligns with sex, right? But then you have emotional intimacy. You can have intellectual intimacy. You can have experiential intimacy. And in those situations, you can have that with anyone, right? So you can get on, you can in your commute to work, and you could be at the coffee shop getting a cup of coffee and have a experiential type of situation or an emotional connection with someone, and you don't even know this person, but it can feel very intimate and connected and bonding, and it could give you something in that moment. Now, it might not be sustainable, but it'll give you something because it's an intimate connection. Um, so I think that that's something that we don't teach people, and it's something that's not always common sense in a way. So when you start to feel these feelings, sometimes we confuse love and say, oh, this is, you don't love me enough. You might be loved enough, you just might not have that intimacy part of it. And because it's not intimate enough for you, you don't feel connected enough. And because you're not feeling connected enough, now you're wanting, or you're craving, or you're desiring some of the more sensual components of it, but you might not actually want penetration, or you might not actually want an orgasm. You might want something different. But if you don't know the differences between the three, then you would be looking at your partner or whomever, and you're like, it's not enough. You're not giving me what I need. But it's on the individual to really figure out, well, what do you want and what do you need? And once you know what you want and you need, then you know what you need to ask for. Because if you want someone to love you harder, what does that mean? You want someone to have sex with you and go harder, you kind of know what that means, but you still might not feel fulfilled. Like, you still might not feel full, right? You still might feel like something's lacking, like something is not giving me enough. But then we go back to the whole premise of, well, what is enough? What are you really asking for?
Mm.
Wow. Yeah, no, for sure. And I think a lot of people get kind of caught up in like, oh, since this person isn't able to meet my needs, the grass must be greener on the other side, because, and they don't actually end up processing again, like the core things that they needed to figure out. So it would help better aid them in the next relationship. Like you just keep hopping from person to person, expecting them to figure it out. But yeah, like you're absolutely right. You have to have that context before you truly try to build a relationship with someone. And I think a lot of people also get caught up in like the love languages, which is supposed to be, a great tool for you to like figure out what you need from a partner. But like, again, like you have to not just look at that, but also look at the different types of intimacy that you need. And like, I don't know, just do a little bit more self discovery to help better aid you
Well,
in
I
your.
think that's why so much of what you're saying, G, and I hope it resonates with folks, is just how liberating and freeing it can be just to have the verbiage, to be able to discern the difference. Because I think that's the part of your definition that you gave of love, is it's complex, it's messy, it's fluid, it's abundant, it's good, it's bad, like it's everything. And so the more we can step into being able to articulate what we're really saying, then we can start to think about the types of relationships we want to cultivate with that knowledge. And it's so interesting because it's starting to have me think about things that like Liv and I have always talked about. And we know too that a lot of the relationships with Black women that we've cultivated, it's been very sisterly, and it's very intimate at times. Just the kind of traditional acts that we think about, doing each other's hairs, staying up late, cooking with each other, all of these. We used to say, girl, all I need is a man for sex, because my homegirls got me with that emotional intimacy, with that experiential intimacy. And sometimes of that just being a symptom of what you've already spoken on. It's rough out here. It's rough out here that we can even seek some of those things outside of a romantic connection. And to me, that's one of the most beautiful things I love about being a Black woman is that we have that expansive love and that capacity and duality that when I say I love Black women, I'm like, yes, I love Black women. And we often think like, oh, okay, so she's into Black girls. I'm like, no, my sexual preference is this, but I have that adoration, that admire. I have that same those same eyes, that same love and intimacy to be in intimate space with Black women. So it's so great to have that language to start to say, oh yeah, that's the warm fuzzies. It's not sexual, but it's that same part of those three aspects of sex, intimacy, and love. And I got a man's now. So you know what I mean? So, and it's just great to be able to differentiate that and how freeing it is to have the language. I think that is just like the
Absolutely.
biggest takeaway of just like having that language to be able to live more into our duality and not feel like we have to pick a box, or to Liv's point, drop somebody because we think it's greener on the other side. It helps us hold ourselves accountable and the people around us.
Absolutely. And so, G, like when you're working with different clients and you're working with women, like what issue when around intimacy, like do you find that most people are struggling with? Because I see reports that say that women, maybe shouldn't do casual sex because we're more looking for like that emotional intimacy piece and like that kind of clashes, and men are more prone to be able to do casual sex because they're looking for that physical intimacy. Like, what's your take on it? And what issues have you, like, what's a common issue that you feel like most people come to you about when it comes?
I think the theme in this is that I'm a little bit more in that open fluid space.
Right.
So I know women that can do casual better than any guy. And I know guys that cannot do casual for to save their life. Like they just can't. They can't. Like it's not part of their DNA. They suck. Like they try, and the next thing you know, it's just like, oh, I love you. You know, like they just can't. They just can't. So I think it depends on the person, and I don't discount the studies, but I think that that's why I feel like it's so important to kind of know your client or know your friend or know your partner so that you can kind of understand like those nuances for them. What shows up a lot is self-esteem, right? So the exact verbiage or the scenario can be different, but what it really gets down to is self-esteem. Um, and I think that that's a real hard one for Black women because there was a time when our body, well, I believe that we're always hypersexualized and we're always fetishized in a lot of different ways and places. Um, but we kind of go through this wave of where having more of a curvy body was not okay, and now it is okay. But then now we're kind of in a space where it is okay, but now it's okay if it kind of looks like this, right? So I think that we're always putting ourselves up against each other and against other people and other races and nationalities, and it influences how we feel about ourselves. And I think what tends to happen is that it shows up in intimate spaces. It shows up when we're trying to have with our partners, or when we're trying to try new things with our partners, or when we're concerned about whether or not we meet our partners or what we think our partners' expectations are in terms of aesthetics, or in terms of I guess what's a good word for it? Expertise in a sense, right? So I think in those situations, it comes up a lot, and it usually comes down to self-esteem. Another one is mindfulness, being able to be mindful, aware, and present during sex is a huge one. Um, and I think that applies for men and women, but I've noticed that a lot of women do struggle with that. And it's hard, especially when you have a partner and you've got a busy life, and especially for women that have children, for women that are navigating their own issues, if they're going back to school or whatever have you. If your life is complete and full, regardless of your age or stage, it is really hard to kind of show up and be present when it's time for you to be present. Um, and I think a lot of women tend to struggle with being able to speak their truth.
Mm.
asking for things and not feeling ashamed about what they want, and not feeling ashamed about not knowing what they want, and giving themselves the space and grace to evolve, in a sense where I think sometimes we say we like certain things or we're into certain things, and we start to think other ways, or we start to become curious or interested in other things, and we're afraid to express that to our partners, or we tend to do things in hiding, right? So I don't want my partner to know that I have this new toy. I don't want my partner to know that I was watching this show, or I don't want my partner to know that, the guy that I saw across the street was kind of cute and I said hi and I felt a little bad. But it's like we're always hiding certain parts of ourselves. And I think what tends to happen is that for a lot of people, not all people, but it does show up in the bedroom where these thoughts start to pop up, or we start to have these feelings, or we start to have these emotions that jump out at the wrong time, right? So we think we're about to do this, but then you're just like, wait, what's going on? And you might not know in that moment, but something feels off or something doesn't feel right. And then, it kind of ruins it. And then, you have to deal with your partner where it's just like, well, is it me? Do you not love me? Is something wrong with me? And then everybody's going around with these insecurities now. And it's all because we're uncomfortable with expressing ourselves, and we're uncomfortable with speaking our truth, whatever that truth is. And it just kind of festers, and then it starts to bubble up when it's not supposed to. So those are, like, I want to say, the top three that I've noticed. There's tons more. But those are the top three that I think for right now, I would say mindfulness, not being able to really like communicate and express your truth. And then also just not really being secure about ourselves.
I think that those are like so ever present, especially in young women today, too. You're talking about us being hypersexualized. And I think, too, what we know because of the distanced virtual world that we've been living in, a lot of my girlfriends like are also not sexually active right now for a multitude of reasons, but there's still this social media perspective that everybody is. And so I think what you're talking about is that there are so many things and so many external factors that can have us questioning our self-esteem or shaping what we think is the standard or the norm. And we sometimes jump to extremes. And then when it comes to being in that space, we don't even realize how much of that's shaping how we're showing up in those moments. And so just being, and I love that just the invitation for mindfulness is like, you don't have to have solutions, but you just got to know what's impacting you in that moment. But I think what you talked about too is just that this kind of more fluid and open way of thinking about love and intimacy and sex. And I think that's also something that's lending itself to the times too, of, people being more open to non-traditional forms of relationships and what it looks like to maybe have multiple partners, or, reframing what monogamy, just really questioning these norms and standards of what love has looked like. And you are about paving those spaces, creating those really, liberated spaces, because you talk about creating just this community for bi-curious women. And so I, want to give you the mic to kind of talk about, what that means, and how being in that space kind of shapes your work. And I just think that that's so relevant to what people are kind of questioning, engaging with now too, just what that means to be holding that space and creating that community.
It's a great question. So my work, and in all transparency, my work is really rooted in creating safe spaces for people. And it started for me with creating safe spaces, safe, non-judgmental spaces for bisexual and sexually fluid women of color. And that's kind of how this started. In terms of like kind of like where the engine started to really run and burn and kind of evolve into what's going on right now. And it came from a place of feeling like isolation, in a sense,
Mm.
where when you when you feel like your world is more than what the narrative that was given to you was supposed to be, and really trying to understand, how do you navigate that? So if for you it was said you should you Black woman, right, you little Black girl, you need to have a job, you need to get married, you need to have children, you need to make sure your husband stays happy, you need to raise your children, and you need to make sure that they go to good schools, because you got to get us out of where we are right now. And we need you to kind of help us transcend to get to the other side, so that your kids and your kids can kind of help, get us in the running. And that's a lot of pressure. Right. But when you think about that, you're kind of forced to find your way in this very narrow space of, I got to do this, and I have to be like this, and I have to have my relationships be like this. I have to be the Cosbys, right? Like I need to be Bill and Claire, right? So I gotta find me somebody that's gonna help me become Bill and Claire, and I need this house, and I have to have this dance. The kids is gonna start dancing. Like you're creating this whole world for yourself. And I think what Straight But Not Narrow Ladies was more of an outlet to say, it's not always gonna look the same for everyone. And if this is something that you feel that rings true to you, where you believe or you know that your interests are not as narrow as what this narrative says that it's supposed to be, where do you go? Who do you talk to people? Like, how do you have these conversations? How do you really understand if this is something that you just want to keep as an idea, or if it's something that you want to pursue? And if you do want to pursue, what does that look and feel like? Like, you don't know much because you've spent your time trying to live up to this expectation that might not have even been yours to begin with. So, that's kind of how it got formed, and that's where it began. And it was really just to find a space that allowed women that didn't feel like they were comfortable in a very strict and narrow heterosexual box, to feel like they can connect to other people and understand what that desire or what that interest or what that thought really means for them as an individual, and not as a community project. Like, it doesn't have to be a community project. It's very individualized and personal. So we have kind of grown and expand, and that has been a beautiful thing to witness, because it doesn't have a label, it doesn't have a criteria. There are women that are married, there are women that are single, there are women that are divorced, there are women that have been in relationships with women before, and there are women that have never even kind of grasp the concept of how I really feel. It's really a gray area, and I feel like I like that, because what it does is it allows whoever feels like it resonates in whatever way to kind of find community and a space of understanding and acceptance, because there is no cookie cutter here. It's going to look and feel differently for everyone by design. And I think what doesn't get said to Black women is that, sexuality is not going to show up the same way in everyone. And it's way more fluid than we like to discuss, right? So sex in general and sexuality, it resides on a spectrum. And I think that there aren't many people that really sit really firm and hard at the opposite ends. So does that mean that everyone is in the middle or kind of in that gray area? No. But when you think about it, by definition, I think it's not as many people as we think that really sit, at 0 and 1, and they're just like only, never, never, never. I would never even think, fathom. I don't want to see. I don't want to know. Like, I think that it's very rare that happens. And I think what tends to happen is because we don't allow people to understand that it is fluid, that when you do have a thought or understanding or an interest, it makes you feel like, oh my God, now I'm this. No, you really might not be. And it's okay. But if you see someone that's attractive, or if you someone says something and it kind of makes you feel a certain way, that's okay. It doesn't mean that you want to take an action on it. It just means that you're just not, at a very defined point on a spectrum. And that changes, right? Because what's appealing today might not be appealing tomorrow. So our community is really rooted in just allowing people to grow. to grow in the way that they feel like is best for them, and to be able to cultivate relationship in ways that they feel like is most authentic and most organic to them, and really find the commonalities and be able to connect based on those, and rule out some of the things that we get pigeonholed into thinking like it has to be like this, or well, I'm married, or I have a boyfriend. That's nice, but that doesn't define who you are. I have children. That's amazing, but that still doesn't define who you are. So if you really dig deeper into it, it's hard when you feel like you're the only one. So, representation is very important.
Mm.
Visibility is very important. And by no means does that mean, you have to wave a flag, because everybody might not be into that. And by no means does that mean that you have to be the poster girl, because everybody might not be into that either. But it's just more so of just recognizing a truth, right? You might like something that everyone doesn't else like, or you may like, who knows, right? But you like what you like, and it's okay, as long as you're not devaluing yourself, as long as you're not being immoral, or as long as you're not unethical, as long as you're really not hurting anyone. It's okay. It's okay. And that's really where we kind of like to sit, and we give recognition to everyone that likes what they like. But when you're in my space, and when you're in things that I curate, you're going to make sure that we're all respectful of each other, and we're all keeping this space safe, and we're all being mindful that we're at different places and stages along our journey. And because of that, you have to allow people to find their way, the way that they want to do it, not the way that you want to do it. So if you want to identify as a label, and you feel like, this is where you need to be, cool. But if you don't identify as a label, but you can, say, I'm attracted to women, or I like women, or whatever the case may be, right? If we're going to have a conversation and we're going to be like, she's got nice legs, if you're going to take that and go, oh, then you don't need to be here. You don't need to be here.
Right.
Because no one said anything that was wrong, right? And no one said anything that was inappropriate. But if you're going to have that type of response, then you don't need to be here. But if you can appreciate something like that, and if it kind of maybe lights a light bulb, then it's like, okay, then you might want to figure out how to find community. Because when you're around people that kind of go into the mindset of, I'm strictly this, I'm strictly that, how do you even have a conversation about anything that's outside of the box? You don't feel comfortable. And it might not mean that you want to act on it. That just means that that's what you want to talk about. And it's okay, right? So it was really just creating, as what you guys seem to be rooted in, is cultivating community, making people feel comfortable, and not allowing people to feel ashamed or bothered because they decide to live their life a certain way, and really being truthful that it's niche, right? It's not going to be for everybody. And that's by design. Just like your friendship groups might not be for everybody. Your relationship is not for everybody. So my community is not for everybody, but it's okay.
Oh my gosh. It's all about us recognizing that we are all multidimensional beings and removing the shame from the conversation. I feel like there's so many stigmas out there around being curious, being queer, all of these things. And I think I love your community because it's removing the shame and like really pushing people to be truthful, honest, showing up as their most like true, authentic self. Because when you don't do that, then you end up like literally resenting yourself. You know what I mean? And you take that
Absolutely.
baggage into every single like relationship and friendship. And that's why, people get bothered by other people, making comments that have nothing to do with them. I'm like, if it has nothing to do with you and you aren't harming anybody and that person's living in their truth, why does it bother you?
Right.
And the
Put them
conversation,
bags down.
look,
Put
look,
those bags down.
like, 'cause it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. And we can create safe spaces where we can have these true and honest conversations. And for people I know, like, I'm sure you kind of come across this, as you were saying, where you might have someone that's like bi-curious and they have this expectation where they have to be truly defined in like that one box of being bi or straight or whatever. And it's like, no, like you don't have to wake up and feel like you're president of bi women to just know, to just have those thoughts of being like, like, I wonder, like, am I attracted to the same sex? Am I attracted to like different types of people? And the more honest you are, like, I feel like the happier your life will be. For sure.
Absolutely.
I think,
Absolutely. I think everybody wants community, right? Everybody wants to feel like they belong to
Yes.
something. And I think that that's okay, right? Like,
mhm.
but I think what we tend to where we tend to struggle with community is that it's nothing wrong with wanting to belong, and it's nothing wrong with wanting to feel like you are a part. What becomes wrong is when you feel like you have to conform, or when you get so enrooted in your community that you don't recognize when you start to change, and you don't allow yourself to change and grow because you feel like I'm in this organization or I'm in this, so I have to be like this forever. No, you really don't have to. You don't have to.
Doing too much. You're just doing too much. Like, chill.
Right.
And I think that's where I think, particularly, and this is really to the Black Girl Folk community, can benefit from spaces like this when society is putting us in so many boxes and has so many projected expectations and stigmas that we have to internalize, being in spaces and opting into spaces that are rooted in this authenticity, rooted in breaking those barriers and really doing a lot of self-reflection, can particularly do so much good for not just Black women, like really marginalized, or people who have kind of been have experienced those kind of systemic and institutional projections of who they're supposed to be and how they show up in this world. So I know I moved and just like, and my poor boyfriend is about to get an earful when we get off this call, because I'll be like, yo, we gotta talk about some things. We're gonna have to talk. So, but I just think that this is hopefully sparking so many reflections for people listening. And before we end and hear about how people can get in touch with these communities and get engaged and hear about you, we always close out with asking our guests this one question to kind of bring it full circle. Because like you said, a lot of what you're saying is in alignment exactly with the Black Girl Flow podcast community. So we want to ask you, G, what does it mean to be in flow to you?
I feel like it means to show up and to really like find your truth, right? So to be in flow for me is kind of like how I want to live every day. I want to live every day in flow. Like I want to allow things to do what it's supposed to do the way that it's supposed to do it. I want to allow the energy that I'm supposed to have, that I'm supposed to give, to kind of go where it's supposed to be. It's really intentional and it's really purposeful. It's not that haphazard, I'm just out here willy-nilly kind of thing. It has that deeper rooted meaning. And I think that when you go below the surface and when you really show up as who you are, that's when it starts to flow. Like that's when you start to feel the synergies and the alignment, and things start to feel like you're in that groove because you're allowing things to happen the way it's supposed to be.
Right, absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself, honestly. Like every day should be a new day for you to live in flow and in alignment with like who you are, what your goals are, the people that you want to be around. And you're right, like it does feel super easy when you just let go and let the universe do its thing. So I love that. I just feel like we're gonna have so many people trying to get in touch with you. So you just gotta like plug, how can people get in contact with you? What are new projects that you've got going on? Any events for straight but narrow ladies? We have to know.
Oh my God, we have so much going on. So we curate travel experiences, and that's kind of like our big thing now. So we just came back from Curacao in January, and it was an amazing trip. And we just finished the planning for our next trip in August. So in August, we're going to Costa Rica. So that's going to be like a big trip for us. It's going to be, oh my God, we're renting a private villa. There's a chef and the bartender and the pool. It is only us on its property. That's kind of how we do our thing. So I'm really excited to do this in Costa Rica. But yeah, get into it. Get into it.
Not me and Lex about to pop up in Costa
Get
Rica
in.
now.
Listen, The
Not
suites are phenomenal. The suites are phenomenal, but I'll continue. So with travel curation is a big part of what I do now. And I think it's because, as we've been talking about, it's really about pouring into yourself, right? Allowing yourself to be who you are and not treating yourself like you're a holiday and not treating yourself like it's a birthday, like allowing yourself to really show up and celebrate and be empowered on a day-to-day basis, right? So travel is a big part of what we're doing. That's our next trip. We're doing a financial workshop in March. We try to do it once a month or once every other month. My business partner is and the co-founder of Shape But Not Narrow Ladies is a finance professional. And what we've learned is that our community needs that. So we want to start offering financial workshops more often since we have an expert on hand to allow the experts to kind of teach the community and have more Black and brown people doing what they need to do to start breaking more of these generational curses. So that's what we have going on next month. I am working on a master class. I have intentions on doing two. One will be centered on dating, and I think the other one is going to be centered on bisexuality, but more so from the lens of like, in my head, I'm calling it I like girls, not what, or so what, and kind of like, what does that mean, right? How does that look and feel? What does it mean versus what society tells you it's supposed to mean? How do you actually find your path in your journey? I think I want to go a lot of different ways with that, and I think it's going to be a great thing. Another thing that we're working on is what else are we doing? So we just launched our website again, and we have a new home and look and feel. I like it. I hope y'all look at it because
the website looks good. We love it. We love that.
I'm so
Y'all
happy.
are doing y'all thing over there.
We did a new so we have a new website with a new brand. And I'm starting to do travel consulting as well, because as I said, travel has become a big portion of what we do. And I've become very passionate about getting Black and brown women, and honestly, women and couples in general, out of their own spaces, right? So I do these immersive types of trips where it's definitely multidimensional. It's not just like, hey, y'all, let's have fun. It's a whole lot of fun, but it's a whole lot of like, let's get into it because we're gonna get the zhuzh together. So we do a lot of that. I'm going to start accepting new coaching clients. As I said earlier, I'm going to open it up to all women, men, and couples. I think that that's important. We always talk about like, Black love and keeping the community together. So then let's start teaching people how to do these things, because we're not learning them in every home, and we're not learning them in school. So we have to learn them someplace, because we can't just be expected to kind of snap our fingers and then we've got these communities and these families and these relationships with our kids and our partners that are just going to be magical. It doesn't work that way. We got to do the work. We got to do the homework. But I think that, I feel like there's more stuff that I got going on that I can't remember, but I feel like every month we're doing like 2 to 3 things, and I can't stop. Like, I can't stop. It's always like, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do this. So it's always like, go, 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 go. But I will say that the best way to kind of stay connected is probably to join our email list and follow us on Instagram, because there's always something going on. And as soon as I think that we're done, I'm kind of like, oh, let's do this. Oh, let's do this. Let's do this too.
No, I feel like the G in your name should stand for getting rid of generational curses. That's what you are.
You might be onto something. Get it together.
Look, you're like, and the G stands for getting rid of these damn generational curses, because
we gotta start somewhere.
What you are doing is truly transformational. And I love how you put it. It's like, we can be by the beach, but we definitely about to get in some mindfulness and self-reflection activities. You know what I mean? Like, it's not just
you're gonna leave me better than you got here. Like, it doesn't, I don't care who you are, I don't care where you're coming from, but you are going to leave me with a little bit more than what you had. On our trips, they always say, I learned something about myself, or I realized something about myself that I didn't know before. So it might be something small or it might be something big, but you are going to leave our experience with a little bit more than what you came here for. And that's the point, right? Because we're supposed to be out here learning and growing and evolving. Let's get into it.
She said, let's be about it.
She took the
Right
words
now.
out of my mouth. Took the words.
Right
Well,
now.
I think what y'all done is so many areas to plug into. So I'm excited for the Black Girl Flow community. G, thank you. Thank you.
You are very
for
welcome. Thank you
your
for having
wisdom.
me.
Yes. I just know so many people are going to be benefited from this conversation, and I'm so excited for them to get plugged into your work because, like you said, you gonna learn something.
You gonna learn something.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you might just
Thank you guys so much. It's been a pleasure. It's I love to be in spaces where you feel seen and heard and where you feel like there's real authentic community. It's not forced. It doesn't need to be coerced. It doesn't need to be scripted. It just flows, right? So I feel like this was like a magical experience, and I love these types of conversations and be connecting. So I'm all about it. I'm all about it. I think you guys are doing a great job. And I look forward to see where you guys go. This has been great.
You might just see us in Costa Rica. I'm not even gonna hold you. We might be looking at some flight tickets right after this call. But thank you again so much for joining us. And like always, y'all, peace, love, blessings. We will see y'all next episode. Bye.